Today's show is sponsored by the ABV Network Merchandise Shop. Check out our large assortment of logo merch and our lifestyle collection as well. Just head over to abvnetwork.com and click on shop. We are also sponsored by The Bar to Go. The Bar to Go offers a fully customizable carrying case that allows you to take your favorite distilled spirits or cocktail ingredients with you. Whether you're looking for yourself, a customized gift, or logo items for your business or event, The Bar to Go can help. Check them out at thebar2go.com. Use the number 2 when you type out The Bar to Go. Did you know Neely Family Distillery now ships its popular distilled spirits directly to you? To order, simply call 859-394-3258. Tell them the ABV Network sent you. Finally, we are sponsored by the upcoming ABV Barrel Shop, a new liquor store experience coming to St. Louis, Missouri. The ABV Barrel Shop will serve as home to the ABV Network and will be owned and operated by Steve Akeley, Jim Fosnot, and Scott Creighton, a.k.a. the Barrel Buddies. To learn more about the investment opportunities in this new venture, listen to the ad at the end of this podcast. And now, on to the show. Hello, everybody. This is Steve Akeley once again. Here we are on vacation. We've got the latest edition of the Bourbon Talk Show. This is episode 4 of season 2. It features Conor O'Driscoll of Heaven Hill and Gary Heingarner of Wood Hat Spirits. Gary is a great friend. Known him for quite a while. Conor, really, I had met right around this time. We did an episode of the Bourbon Show with him. Then we did this. And then I actually saw him at a live event. We actually hung out all night at that event, which is kind of cool. Got to really know him. He's a great guy. I think you're going to enjoy the show. So check it out.
Let's drink!
First guest started at Brown Forman, where he trained under Chris Morris, which is pretty cool. In 2019, he became master distiller for Heaven Hill. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Conor O'Driscoll. Hey, Conor, how you doing?
Ooh, hey, Steve. Hey, McNew, Stephanie. Hello. Good to see you all. Should I call you Stephanie or McNew? I don't know.
I go by McNew here, but you can call me Stephanie too. I don't care.
It feels more polite to call you Stephanie.
Yeah. So either one works for sure.
Yeah.
So Conor, obviously, being from Ireland, before you came over, got in the bourbon business and all that, would you be more likely to have a drink of bourbon or have a Guinness? What would be?
Guinness was probably the drink of choice. Okay. I actually survived my whole high school career without ever drinking at all. Yes, I'm Irish, and yes, I survived high school without drinking. But the night I graduated high school, I had a half pint. You could either get a glass or a pint. That's the terminology. So a half pint is called a glass. So I had a glass of Guinness, and I was like, I like this stuff. And, the rest, as they say, kind of is history. So Guinness was the drink of choice, and didn't drink a lot of whiskey. I tell a story about some medicinal Irish whiskey when I was a kid, and my mom would make these things called an egg flip, which was like an egg beaten into warm milk with cinnamon and sugar, when we were sick. And they were kind of okay, but they were really good when she put some whiskey in it. Neither of my parents drank, by the way, but okay. At some point, anyway, Mom was making me an egg flip. I had a cold or whatever I had, and I asked her to put some whiskey in it because they were much better. And I might have been 7 years old. And that was the last egg flip I ever got with whiskey in it, because she was like, oh shit, I'm raising an alcoholic. So, so that was kind of my early drinking career.
Okay. So back in Ireland, before you came to the States, had you even tried bourbon, or were you, obviously Irish whiskey would be the thing I would think you're drinking. So had you been a tried bourbon? And if so, were you a fan?
I had not. And I was in college in the late 80s, 85 to 89 was when I was in college. And
not good time for bourbon anyway. Yeah.
Exactly. Bad time for bourbon, and not just a good, just a bad time for whiskey in general. I know I drank some whiskey in college, but it was not in any kind of, I'm sipping this to enjoy it. Mostly I was a beer guy. The whiskey and the bourbon came later.
Okay. So when you came over to the U.S., you were in the pharmaceutical business. So tell us a little bit about what your job was at that time.
So my degree is chemical engineering. I got that from the University College Dublin, and I was hired out of college by Pfizer in Ireland. And within, I don't know, 9 or 10 months of them hiring me, they sent me to Terre Haute, Indiana, for a 6-month assignment. Terre Haute, where? Who? What? And I think I maybe had heard of Indiana in Ireland, but maybe not. And I definitely had not heard of Terre Haute. But like the night before I flew out, I watched Steve Martin's Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid. Yeah. And like the protagonist, or the bad guy's dying line is, "At least we got Terre Haute, Indiana." I'm like, oh shit, where am I going? So I ended up there, and we were using a genetically engineered bacteria to make the enzyme used to make cheese. So as more or less a fresh graduate, this wasn't just cutting edge technology. This is bleeding edge technology. This was the first food ingredient that the FDA had approved that had been made with recombinant DNA technology. So I was like, yes, sign me up. I am in. So I went over there for 6 months. 6 years later, I quit, and long twisty road brought me to where I am now.
One of the stops on that twisty road, of course, it was 15 years at Brown-Forman. So tell us a little bit about your career there, what some of your responsibilities were.
All right. So the way I ended up at Brown-Forman was, I'd always said if this American experiment didn't work out, it would be cool to go back to Ireland and get a job making Guinness, because I'm from Dublin. Guinness is from Dublin. It seemed like, that would be really fun to do. Well, I met my wife at a Derby party, Kentucky Derby party, as you do around these parts, and realized that, I'm not going back to Ireland anytime soon, but I'd started drinking bourbon, was kind of enjoying it. Like this stuff is good, kind of getting into the history and the art, and the science of it. And I was like, the Guinness thing is probably not going to work out for me, but this bourbon thing seems like it's got some options. So around about 2002, I started knocking on doors, and there was none of this in 2002. There was no bourbon boom. There was maybe some tiny tourism, but nothing like there is now. So it took me 2 solid years of knocking on doors before Brown-Forman opened theirs, and I stuck my foot in the door, and they couldn't get rid of me. And so I got hired as production manager at the Brown-Forman Distillery in Shively on the south end of Louisville. And that's where I started making Early Times and Old Forester, and coincidentally, a lot of whiskey for Heaven Hill. You're all familiar with the Heaven Hill fire in '96.
Yep.
The short version should have wiped Heaven Hill out. Should have taken us off the map. The industry, however, rallied around, and Brown-Forman were first in line and said, "We've got production capacity. What can we do to help?" And started producing whiskey for Heaven Hill. And when they hired me in 2004, most of the whiskey we were making was for Heaven Hill. And, so it's kind of a nice coincidence that I end up at Heaven Hill making whiskey for Heaven Hill again. But that's kind of where I cut my teeth. The industry was very, very different then, but 17, almost 18 years later, it's been a hell of a ride.
Yeah. And, doing the job that you do, you're responsible for all parts of production. But I always hear that you were really into the yeast fermentation side of the business. What captures your interest in that part of it?
You know what? Yes, I am. I'm a yeast geek, self-avowed, self-confessed yeast geek. It's kind of, without yeast, there's no beer, there's no bread, there's no cheese. Without beer, there's no whiskey. So yeast is where it starts. And the entwined history of yeast and humanity goes back millennia. And that kind of resonated with me for some reason. And, the process, the genetically engineered bacteria that I worked on in Terre Haute was a fermentation process. The process I worked on in Ireland was a fermentation process. And, so now I'm, fermenting yeast to make beer, to make whiskey. And it's a really fascinating thing. We harness this single cell fungus, and we set everything up just right for it, and it makes this great beer that we make whiskey from. And that's one angle to look at it from. And you kind of flip that around, like kind of flip the lens around, like, or did the yeast harness us to set everything up, build all these distilleries and these fermenters and do all this mashing and understand all the science to set up their perfect life cycle so they could make more yeast? So, there's these kind of really, geeky scientific rabbit holes you can go down. There's the connections with history, that, Egyptians figured out fermentation, and probably before that. It's so multifaceted. It's so deep. It's so, you can do it on a very facile level. You can go as deep into molecular biology as you want, and you still end up with great stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Another passion that we both share is a passion for enjoying what's called Dusties, old whiskey.
Yeah.
And you're a fan of that too. And where does that come from for you? Is you just enjoy the good taste, or you like again, is it a history thing? Because you get to literally taste history, which is so unique.
I think it's probably more the history thing. Mm-hmm. Honestly, I think the whiskey that is being made now is probably the best whiskey that's ever been made. We understand the science behind it. We understand, we're attuned to the art of it, the magic of it. We get all that, and we've got better process control, whatever you want to call it. So probably the consistency and quality of the whiskey we're making now, we being the industry, is probably the best it's ever been. But this is a millennia old business, and people have been doing this and perfecting it and tweaking it for as long as there's been fermentation and distillation. So to taste an old whiskey and to see, what came before, it's just super interesting. I mean, I've tasted, probably the oldest one I've tasted was distilled in 1916. And bottled, I think it was in 1926, maybe. So when I tasted it, it had been distilled like 101, 102 years prior. Yeah. And just the fact that, a guy like me made that and had the same passion, the same interest, trying to make good stuff, here I am 100 years later tasting that. And it was good. I wouldn't say it was great. It was good. The coolest thing about it was 100 freaking years old.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you ever get caught up in that yourself? Because even the stuff that you're laying down, that'll just be regular shelf items. I mean, I think about this. I'm 53 today, and if I was in your job and working at Heaven Hill and I'm making something, it could not. You're talking about products that could be coming out not for 15 years, and I'm like, where am I going to be in 15 years? You start thinking ahead to that, and then you can even take it one step further than that, talking about what you're talking about just a moment ago, where maybe 100 years from now, this bottle somehow makes it to someone 100 years from now, and they're like, I wonder who distilled this. They go back and do a little research, and they're like, well, that was Conor O'Driscoll that was the
weird Irish guy.
But it's pretty neat to think about, isn't it?
It's really cool to think about it, and it's humbling at the same time. It's like, I've been with Heaven Hill not quite 3 years now, so nothing that I have had a hand in producing is on the shelf yet. Yet here I am representing whiskeys that some of which were made 18 years ago, before I got in the industry. So, and by Parker Beam, who is like the legend of legends. Legend, perfect, the legend of legends, exactly. So it does. I mean, it's humbling. I hope it gives me humility to think that, all right, long after I'm retired and potentially dead, people are going to be drinking whiskey that I was responsible for. So it keeps you honest. It keeps you humble. I hope it keeps me humble. That I want people to drink my whiskey 4 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and think, wow, this guy knew what he was doing.
Yeah. Well, in 2019, you took the job as master distiller of Heaven Hill. So tell us, just give us a little insight, because it has to be such a unbelievable moment in a person's career. So tell us how it came about, and again, your feelings, if you could take us back to that day when they're like, we'd like to make an offer. Tell us what that was like.
Well, it's not quite as glorious as you might imagine. So we talked about earlier, I was with Brown-Forman for almost 15 years, 5 of them in Louisville at the Shively Distillery, 9 out at Woodford. Then I left in the summer of 17 and joined Angel's Envy, which is a big move. It's a big move to leave a company like Brown-Forman and go to what wasn't quite a startup, but it was close to a startup, much different scale. Switched from Brown-Forman to Bacardi. And finally, 18 months in, I'm finally kind of, feeling at home. I know my way around. I know where the coffee is, making connections in the Bacardi organization. And Heaven Hill call and say, we would love you to be our master distiller. And honestly, my first reaction was, you know what? I just made a big move. I'm okay. Thanks very much. And then I came home and I told my wife, who's like just the coolest person ever. And she was like, you said what? Wrong answer, you fool. And then I was like, shit, yes, that was the wrong answer. So luckily they called back and I was like, yeah, let's talk. And, the kind of a good analogy I came up with. So Angel's Envy is in downtown Louisville on Main Street, and I would look out my office window and look at the Slugger Field, the Louisville Bats AAA baseball diamond, a gorgeous little AAA field. And the analogy is I'm a pitcher for the Louisville Bats. And the New York Yankees just called. And if you're a Atlanta Braves fan, the Atlanta Braves just called. If you're a Sox fan, the Sox just called. Whatever. The big team called and said, we want you. And you don't say no to the Yankees or the Braves or the Sox. So dumbass that I am, I said no. But my smart wife said, don't say no. And honestly, it was the best decision I've ever made. It's like, I still pinch myself. How did I end up here? My title is distillery manager / master distiller. So job one is running the distillery, making the whiskey. It's one of the biggest bourbon distilleries in the world. And I was talking to my buddy Freddie No today. They're expanding the Claremont facility. I don't think they're quite up to our capacity yet. They might exceed us soon. Sazerac are expanding Buffalo Trace. I don't know where they are, but whether we're 1 or 2 or 3,
still a lot of whiskey.
It's a lot of whiskey. So just to put it in perspective, we mill over 1.1 million pounds of grain every day.
Unbelievable.
And we magically convert that into over 1,500 barrels of whiskey every day.
Every day.
And that's job one, is to do that. And I've got a great team there. I mean, everybody there is passionate and dedicated. And I've got some the shift supervisors, Abby, my QC specialist. She's awesome. We just got a great team who are passionate, focused on it. We want to make the whiskey better today than it was yesterday, and by God, it was good yesterday.
Yeah.
So
now, one of the most fun yearly offerings, I think, is the Parker's Heritage. Not only because it does some great work by being the charitable part of it, but each yearly offering is so unique that has to be a fun one to work on. And the 2021 came out recently. So tell us a little bit about that one and what it is like to work on Parker's Heritage every year.
When I took this job, the first realization was that I literally stand on the shoulders of giants, and no bigger giant than Parker Beam, our master distiller emeritus. He came down with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, and ultimately it killed him. But as you said earlier, Steve, legend of legends. There's everybody in the industry knows him, loves him, respects him, and in his honor, we bring out the Parker's Heritage Collection every year, and a portion of the sales go to the ALS Foundation. And I've seen the impact that donation has to that organization. So that's really cool. And every year that we the innovation team, which is production, marketing, brand, it's a bunch of people who sit around and really we sweat this one. I mean, it's one thing to bring out Elijah Craig Toasted Barrel. That's relatively easy, but we're bringing out a Parker's Heritage. This is in honor of Parker Beam. We're going to do this right. So there's lots of things that they're not ready yet. No, that doesn't live up. Okay, this is special. So this year's one that we just brought out is wheat whiskey in a heavily charred barrel, a number 5 char, which the scale goes to 4. Right. So Parker burned the shit out of the barrel, and we aged bourbon, we aged rye, and we aged wheat whiskey in it. And those are the last 3. And, you would think that, a heavily charred barrel, it's going to taste like a campfire. It's going to taste like a piece of charcoal, but it's exactly the opposite. That heavy char burns off so much of, those extractables, if you want to get technical about it, the stuff that gets soaked out of the barrel into the whiskey, and puts so much charcoal in there that there's a lot of kind of filtering and mellowing that goes on. And wheat whiskey, very mild, soft, gentle, sweet, yeasty, nutty type of whiskey. You would think that after 11 years in a heavily charred barrel, it's going to be the distillate, the whiskey itself, is going to be overpowered by the big barrel and the long time, the big char. But because it's kind of counterintuitive, that big char burns off a lot of the heavy duty stuff. It's this really soft, subtle, very drinkable, really enjoyable whiskey, and such a mind game with you, because again, you're expecting smoke and char and heavy and rich, but it's soft and supple and gentle and just a really delicious whiskey.
Yeah, very cool. Conor, I know that you're in demand, and of course, the term rock stars often now is presented as masters distillers are the rock stars of the industry. So,
stop it.
Well, hey, I bet you've signed a bottle or two, so I get that, and that's the sort of adulation that I can understand, but. What does it feel like just, going in the, through the liquor store and there's the, a bottle. And again, I you can say, well, I haven't distilled this yet, but, within a year or two, you're going to have like this Evan Williams bottle of Bond will be stuff that you made. What's it like, as you see these bottles of the such well-known brands that you can probably say that you're making that now? It has to be amazing, right?
Honestly, it's fun as hell. It really is. Yeah. And, 14 years at Brown-Forman, I see stuff come out that I know I had a hand in. I've got, connections on Instagram or whatever that text me about, hey, this Woodford Masters collection, what do you know about that? And, it's like, well, I made it. So that it feels really good. And so going back to what we said earlier, like, I hope that it tastes as good as I think it does. And so yeah, it's very gratifying, but at the same time, I really hope it keeps me honest, because I'm not going to cut corners. I'm not going to, try and cheapen the whiskey to, save 50 cents or whatever it might be. This whiskey will have my name on it. It'll have Heaven Hill's name on it. It'll have, it's got our reputation riding on it. So that's where the win is. Heaven Hill's history is great whiskey at a reasonable price. And the put that on my gravestone. Great whiskey at a reasonable price, you know. Yeah, I think that is where it's at. You know, it's fun to see the unicorns selling for a shit ton of money on the secondary market, but that's not really where we play. I mean, we sell Elijah Craig under $40. We sell, you know, Evan Williams Bottle and Bond under $20, and it's great whiskey. It's 4 years old, 100 proof, you know, and that's our DNA. That's how Heaven Hill started. That's how we've survived almost 86 years now, and that's how I hope it continues.
Yeah. Now, I would never ask you to give away any company secrets, and I'm not asking that now, but it is a business of innovation. So can you tell us about, you know, experimentation and, you know, anything that you're working on, or how does that work? Or do you just come up with ideas at this point and write them down and then try things? How does all that side of the business work?
So, you know, the smaller the distillery is, the easier it is to like write things down and just give them a shot. Mm-hmm. The Bernheim distillery that I manage, right. We have 17 fermenters, each of which is 124,000 gallons. So as you think about like innovating in the lab with the beaker and stuff like that, our beakers are 124,000 gallons. So it's a little difficult to really, you know, innovate on like, hey, let's try some roasted quinoa. There's not enough roasted quinoa on the planet to fill a 124,000 gallon fermenter. That being said, I mean, the you know, we keep on bringing out these high quality, innovative brands, and you know, Parker's is a perfect example of that. You know, the Elijah Craig Toasted Barrel, the Heaven Hill 7-year-old, all these things that we've kind of flexed our inventory. We have over 1.9 million barrels aging now that we, you know, from our 5 mash bills. So we can do cool things with that. But the, you know, the way they show up is kind of like the Larceny Elijah Craig barrel proofs. Like, let's pick something special. Let's age it a little bit longer. Let's bring this out as this kind of unique, you know, 3 times a year on a cadence, and do something cool with that. That's one level, and then at the distillery level, the most kind of ongoing innovative thing we're doing, we have a program called Grain to Glass, and this is kind of an homage to sense of place. You know, we grow corn and wheat and now rye. We're doing a lot of Kentucky rye that we're supporting local farmers. You know, working with different organizations to promote the resurgence of rye as a Kentucky crop. And, you know, probably in December, we will, you know, I say probably because the last 3 Decembers we've done it, we will mash 3 mash bills of all these locally sourced grains. And that's our Grain to Glass program. And we partner with typically independent stave to come up with some cool barrels. We've done French oak and Slovakian oak, and I can't remember what else, but they've got all these, they are PhDs of wood science, and, you know, we partner closely with them. So we make a high wheat bourbon, a high rye bourbon, and a high rye, or as, you know, as they say around here, a high rye whiskey. And we put them in these cool barrels, and I think this will be year 4 or 5. I think this is year 4 that we're doing it. So at some point in the next, you know, probably 2, 3, 4 years, we'll start with, you know, releasing these things, and that's
the fans,
you know,
us will get to try those.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and
that's cool.
You know, the distillate off the stills was great. The 1-year-old, 2-year-old that I've tasted is maturing really nicely, and that promises to be great. And it's great whiskey with a great story. You know, sense of place. It really focuses on hyper local. It's almost like farm to table, which is why we call it Grain to Glass.
Yeah. For those that haven't had a chance to get to Heaven Hill, you guys recently had the big distillery expansion. Tell us a little bit about, you know, what's different and what to expect the next time that we are there to visit.
So not distillery expansion, but
the visitors experience.
Visitors. So we had the Heaven Hill Bourbon Heritage Center, which is now the Heaven Hill Bourbon Experience, and I've been to a lot of visitor centers and they're all good, but I was kind of getting a little bit jaded about it. And okay, we're going to spend $20 million and spend 3 years completely revamping the Heaven Hill bourbon experience. And I was like, okay, great, fine, okay. And with COVID and everything, I really didn't get to Bardstown to see how this thing was developing. I'd seen some of the renderings and talked to the team that were leading this. But when I went down there for the opening, I was blown away. So
yeah,
Anna Hibbs, Susan Wall, Jeff Crow were the leaders on that. And holy crap, they knocked it out of the park. This place, I mean, we got this retail, because it's all about retail, where you can get T-shirts and bottles and whatever else. But, you can go, there's the Elijah Craig, Larceny, deep dive into the history. There's a whole section on bottle and bond. You go upstairs to the Five Brothers Bar and Grill. Fantastic bar. You can get cocktails, the Five Brothers bourbon that you can only get there. And of course, the Five Brothers are the Shapiro brothers that founded Heaven Hill in 1935. It's a spectacular experience. A deep dive into the history of bourbon, history of Heaven Hill. You can go as deep as you want. You can go upstairs and get a cocktail. It's pretty spectacular. So yeah, come one, come all. It's impressive.
Very cool. Last question. We always like to have a little bit of fun by having a little bit of twist on a normal question. And this one is, you have such a big portfolio. And matter of fact, there's some things that are only available regionally. You can't get them everywhere, which is kind of cool too, especially as bourbon fans enjoy hunting down things and stuff like that. Is there a hidden gem? And the portfolio is great. Everything's good across the board. But is there something that maybe as a bourbon fan, they might not have tried yet, and it's something that they need to seek out?
So short answer, yes. Okay. And there are 2 branches you can go. Do you want, somebody just said we need more Fight and Cock 103. There's
That's
always
Illinois,
a Fight and Cock fan, yes. But, I'm drinking Pikesville Rye, 110 proof, 6 years old.
Okay.
We don't advertise this. We don't brag about it. It's spectacular. And this was the hidden gem for me. I've told the story several times, but my local liquor store here, the Wine Rack on Frankfurt Avenue, he had it in his window. And I'm walking by before I got this job, walking the dogs, and I say, Pikesville Rye? Who the hell is making rye whiskey in Pikesville, Kentucky? Oh, my God. And then I get this job, and I realize, oh, my shit, it's Pikesville, as in Pikesville, Maryland, and it's an homage to Maryland rye whiskey. And it's 6 years old, it's 110 proof, and it's spectacular. So that's my, and it's generally,
that's the hidden gem. Yeah,
that's cool. The hidden gem. But Patrick Little just beat me to it because Mellow Corn's the other one.
Yeah.
Mellow Corn, 4 years old, 100 proof, bottle and bomb. The label hasn't changed since 1945. It is sweet. It is grain forward. It's aged in a used barrel.
It's got corn bottles coming up.
It's got the most garish label you've ever seen.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, and
it's great whiskey. My wife and I were out to this fancy dinner the other night, and they had Mellow Corn on the menu, and I was like, "Oh, that's my nightcap." And the waitress kind of looked. It was like, "Really?" I was like, oh yeah, Mellow Corn is a nightcap, and it's so you can go for the what is it, $12, $15 Mellow Corn, 4 years old, bottle and bond, beat that anywhere, and it's great. Or you can search out and Pikesville is pretty much nationwide. It's a very low volume. I bet your local guy has it. Seek it out. You will not be disappointed. 110 proof, 6 years old. I got one big honking rock in the middle of this. Makes the best Manhattan. It's just fantastic.
Nice. Now, we did have Bernie Lubbers on this very own show, and he's, of course, a big Mellow Corn fan. And he claims there's some barrels that are like 17 years old. Is that true? And if so, can we try that at some point?
Yes, it is true. And, this is a great story. we had some mellow corn that had been in a barrel for, I don't know, 10 years, 12 years. And we tasted it. It was like, it tastes exactly the same as it does in 4 years. Nothing has changed. Like, well, shit, what are we going to do with this? Well, leave it in the barrel and see what happens. 17 years later, we tasted it as like nectar of the gods.
Oh,
you're
killing me.
It's
Because I love mellow corn and I want to try this. Yes.
It's really good. So we're Bernie, led by Bernie and ably abetted by me, we're trying to figure out a way to get this in a bottle and on the shelf, and can watch this space. But it's one of those whiskey god things that, let's see what happens.
This is scoop here. Yeah, that's huge.
It's spectacular. It's ridiculously good. It's corn whiskey that's been in a used barrel for 17 years. Like, what? And oh my God, it's spectacular.
Well, my interest is definitely peaked on that one. So yes, I'm very much into it. Love the idea. Mellower corn, as Patrick says there. That's
exactly fun. Yes.
So very, very cool. Conor, thanks so much for joining us. Do you have time to stick around? And
I will stick around and drink my cocktail and listen. This is fun as hell, Steve. Thank you. Absolutely. It's always good to hang with you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. It is fun. Yeah, we appreciate it. So what we'll do next, we'll take a quick break. And then when we come back, we'll be talking to Gary Heingarner. Should be fun. Hello, this is Steve Akeley of the ABV Network. Let's talk about the people who make this show happen. First up is Leatherwood Distillery in Pleasant View, Tennessee. Company founder Andy Lang started distilling as a hobby while serving his country as an elite Green Beret. Andy distilled all over the world during his time in the military and brought this passion back to him in the U.S. when he returned home. A visit to Leatherwood combines Andy Lang's unique distilled spirits and a museum of artifacts from his time serving the U.S. Share a drink with a fallen soldier at their bar where you can grab an acrylic bio off the wall that celebrates the individuals who gave the ultimate sacrifice to protect his or her country. They will also ship their distilled spirits directly to you, so check them out at leatherwooddistillery.com. We are also sponsored by Moonshine University. This longtime partner for the ABV Network helps educate individuals looking to get into the distilled spirits business, service industry employees looking to expand their knowledge, and individuals simply wanting to know more about the process and history of the spirits industry. In 2017, I completed my Executive Bourbon Steward certification at Moonshine University, and it's something I continuously draw upon and connect with fellow graduates. Check out their full listing of classes, including Executive Bourbon Steward certification, production classes, and more at moonshineuniversity.com. Okay, let's talk about Neely Family Distillery. In 2018, I met Royce Neely at an industry event. He started appearing on our shows, and we became friends during my frequent visits to Kentucky. Today, he's leading the way for young distillers making their mark on the bourbon industry. A visit to Neely Family Distillery combines family history, a look at what makes their products unique, and of course a tasting through their whiskeys, moonshines, and creams. Check them out at NeelyFamilyDistillery.com and visit them in Sparta, Kentucky. All right, back to the show.
Freddie Mills of Ruse.
Our next guest clearly has three different careers that all tie into what he's doing today. So the first, an agronomist. So, you talk about farming and corn. There's probably nobody who knows more than this individual. And then he worked for Independent Stave. So you've got the corn part of it. Now you got the barrel part of it. And of course, he started putting all this together. And from his passion, from wanting to bring this to Missouri, he started Wood Hat Spirits. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Gary Heingarner. Gary, hey, how you doing?
Good to be here, Steve. It's always a pleasure,
Yeah, absolutely. But, one of the craziest things, and Gary, I love coming out to your place. Gary is, one of I always say there's like the big three in St. Louis. There's three distilleries that do an incredible job. There's other ones that are coming up, but I think there's three that we can be very proud of. Gary's being part of that. Of course, Stumpy Spirits and Still 630. Those are the big three. If you're coming to St. Louis, you want to hit those for sure, and then maybe check out some of the other ones as well. But Gary is so unique, and he's got this great mind, and he knows a little bit about everything, and he's innovative. And one of the coolest things, and I'm not kidding about this. This is you're going to think I'm making this up, but this is for real. Gary, of course, has been doing a lot of work in corn. And, if you get into the blue corns and stuff that has the antioxidants in it, he's doing some work with the University of Missouri where they're seeing what does this mean? If you distill it through, is all that still there? And can you concentrate that? And Gary even has an experiment on his desk, and it's literally this blue corn, like concentrate, and it looks really cool. And he's like, this may be the cure for cancer one day. And so he's doing that type of stuff. And so you go to Gary's place and he's literally working on the cure for cancer as a distiller. So tell us about that, Gary. How does this come about?
Well, we got all that figured out, Steve, and we're moving on to bigger and better things.
That's good. That's good. Buy stock in Woodhead Spirits as they get the cure for cancer.
Well, it's kind of cool. And I just kind of put some of this together the other day, but, the only grain we eat that's blue, or the only antioxidants we eat in a grain is a blue corn.
Yeah.
Now, so having said that, I just learned about the oxy sorghum, that in Texas they just developed, but it's basically the same antioxidants that's coming out of here. But for all the corn cultures for centuries have said blue corn's healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Little did we put it all together. That's because antioxidants,
Yeah.
And it's kind of cool. Now, when you distill it, you your vapor barrier leaves it behind, but still, it's great. We make a lot of cornbread. We make, grits and so forth out of stuff in the selection process of corn. But I think we just kind of started touching the surface of some of these things.
Yeah.
And that's when I get so excited about some of these heritage corns that we've dropped off in the way of in the hybridization. I've just got through reading a couple of books on the fathers of hybrid corn. Really interesting what we gave up to go this direction. We don't even know what we've left behind.
Yeah.
They were worried about this in 1940. They were worried about the same thing in 1913. They were worried about this in 1900. Same situation. We got all this diversity. What happens when we put it all together and we drop off all these things and just select for starch? What else is there out there that we don't even know that existed? And now it's going to be gone.
Yeah.
Really fascinating to me. And
It is.
That's kind of where I'm at today. So,
yeah. And we're definitely going to talk a little bit about the work that you got going on in corn. I think people have no idea. And it's definitely worth going out to your place, if nothing else, to see what you have in terms of corn research, which is really cool. But let's talk a little bit about that first career, agronomist. What exactly were you doing, coming out with that degree, Gary?
Well, I was working in agriculture before I was an agronomist, actually. My first working with corn and so forth was as a Peace Corps volunteer in India.
Mm-hmm.
I was a young man in the early 20s, and we went there. I was part of the Green Revolution when
In the early 20s.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was part of the Green
Oh, in
Revolution.
your early 20s.
Yeah. A long time ago. So anyway, but that's when I first learned that people have a preference for taste. We try to introduce some hybrid corn, which phrases, oh my God, if we could quadruple the yield, but it doesn't taste good. People just were afraid to talk. Just didn't taste good. I thought, what the hell? It's food, right?
Right.
And as a young man, you think, when people are starving to death, who gives a damn what it tastes like? Well, it's very important what it tastes like. And we're still dealing with the whole situation today. But that's where I really started with the Peace Corps, and then coming back out of the Peace Corps and dealing with agriculture in India. That's when I decided to go get a degree in agronomy. So that's where I got my master's degree in agronomy, and the official agronomy work was in Montgomery County, in Lincoln County, and Warren County as a agronomist for the University of Missouri. Kind of solve problems, help people with yields, bugs, insects, chemicals, whatever the problem is with raising corn. That's kind of what I did. And I run a soil testing laboratory because we did our own soil tests on a local basis at that point. So that's kind of what I did. Worked in Russia a couple of times in some projects. So I've been really lucky to have had some exposure other than local situations. That's really helped for me to think outside the box, so to speak. And if there is one thing that runs true in where I've been and what I'm doing and where I'm going down the road, is to be able to think outside the box. And that's hard. It's hard to think out box think outside the box unless you've been outside the box.
Mm-hmm.
And that really helped me, and it's helped me with the agronomy part of it. So that's
So
kind of
that's-
where it happened. And then as an agronomist, that's really why I started with Independent Stave Company. You know, they weren't looking for a barrel maker. Now, I cut stave bowls as a kid. We had 720 acres of white oak, and cutting stave bowls is a damn hard job. Dirty, hot, and cold. And I worked all my life to get away from it. Now I'm back there again, you know?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I am familiar with the stave bowl part of things. And it's real helped me to understand in terms of a distillery about the wood, and you know, that's a whole chinkapin thing where that came from, was my understanding of that, those aspects of it. So
Mm-hmm.
did I answer your question? I get lost sometimes.
You did. No, you did. You absolutely. So tell us a little bit about your work at Independence, David. First of all, how long were you there? You were there a long time, weren't you?
Yeah, I started in 97 and I left in 12.
Okay.
I think
Yeah.
it's 16, 17 years
Yeah. Yeah.
in that ballpark. There was a little overlap. You know, I was kind of doing both things at the same time for a while. But like I said, they didn't need a barrel maker. They needed somebody to get rid of waste. And as agronomists, growing stuff, learning plant growth and so forth, soil testing, they wanted somebody to get rid of sawdust and chips and so forth. And they wanted to kind of clean up their acts. And that's where I fit in. I didn't make barrels. I get rid of waste.
Right.
So, you know, when you take a round log and you make square boards, you make a lot of waste. And so that was my job, was find some place to deal with this and make $1 while you're at it, Gaddy. So
Right. Yeah.
that's what I did. And so we started with potting mix. We started with chicken manure and sawdust. Very interesting. Unless you've unloaded semi-trailer loads of tanker trucks of chicken shit, you really don't know what life's experience is around. It's 100 degrees and you got 45 minutes to get that shit off the truck or a blow up.
Oh man.
So anyway, we started there and we found a little more economical output, a little more effective way. We continue to make compost and potting mix and potting soils and so forth. But our big thing was to move it out and do something with it right away. So this went on for several years. And today, Independent Stave Company they're clean. They don't have any waste. Everything that they produce out of that tree is utilized in some kind of an economical gaining situation that they don't have stuff laying around. They're a waste-free company today. And that was a big part of that. I'm proud of it. So, you know, there's everything. You got sawdust, you got bark, you got mulch, you got all that little stuff that comes out of the crows. That's different kind of stuff. It has to go a different place, you know? So it was challenging to do that. But that's what I did for Independent Stave. And in the process of being around all the staves, you know, you get freeze up and it rains and all that black shit runs out the bottom. You think that's what we're drinking if you don't leave it out in the rain long enough. You know, that's where I started learning about the importance of rainwater in the aging stage. You know, it's not about air at all. It's about rain. It's just too hard to track rain. So that's why we don't talk about how many inches of rain fell on it, you know, and so it's 90 days. What 90 days was that? June, July, and August when we got 14 inches, or was it June, July, and August when we got half an inch?
I'll have to send you a video. We had a little bit too much to drink one time, and Rick, the legend runner there, the guy with the background of the Florida there, he tried explaining that, and he was right, but he just was a little bit over imbibed, and it just was for comedic value at that point, having him explain it. It's good. It's a good video. I'll send it to you. But basically, he's and he can't tell me any different. He's telling me what he learned from Gary Heingarner. I'm telling you, watching that video. And again, if you know what he's saying, everything he learned there, he learned from Gary. No doubt in my mind.
Well, I have a big advantage from not being from the industry.
Mm-hmm.
I can think outside the box real clear. And I can approach it from a different standpoint, you know. And then in the whiskey business, we approach whiskey making from what I say 3 different directions. You know, we have one that's science, we have one that's tradition, and then we got folklore. You know, and we rely on all 3 of those things to make our judgments. Sometimes we know this, you know, the HPLC says this, but he says it doesn't taste very good, you know, but we've always done it this way. And my grandfather said, whatever. And so it's all a mixture of all those things, you know.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting to me to have people like Conor on here, and because he's got to deal with that. He comes from legends, he comes from tradition, and yet there's a scientific aspect that you got to look at too.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting, but I don't have, my great grandfather didn't make whiskey. I come from generations of teetotalers, so I can approach the whole thing from a new light and fresh and rely on science. And the whole wood thing out in the weather is just, to me, we've kind of missed the boat a lot of ways. But when we put whiskey in the barrel, we put water, and we put alcohol in wood. And that wood was a living thing at one time, and it has a certain amount of moisture and sap. And so when you leave that stave out in the rain, it tends to wash that stuff out that's water soluble.
Yeah.
So if you don't want water soluble tannins in your whiskey, you wash it out first.
Right.
And if you stick it in the kiln when you just dehydrate it, then you just dehydrate it. And once you put water back in it, then you rehydrate it. Right. And this you got to age it another 4 or 5 years or whatever. Those are real complicated. It kind of depends on where you're going to make your cuts. If you got a pot still or continuous flow, if you got heads, you got tails, how long you're going to have it in there. All those things are complicated in barrel aging of whiskey. Then you have the whole thing about what kind of corn you're going to use, what it tastes like, percentages where it cuts out. Really interesting. It's real fascinating.
Gary, what were you wanting to accomplish when you decided to open up a distillery? What was the goal there?
Well, all the time I worked for Independent Stave, I said, this is crazy. We make all these barrels. We ship all these loads of staves to Kentucky. We got all this corn in the boot hill, and it goes right across the river to Kentucky. But we can't make bourbon in Missouri. What is this? Got to ship the barrels down there. Got to ship the corn down there, but we can't make it. And I thought, what's wrong with this picture? Well, you got to go to Kentucky to make bourbon. I heard it over and over and over again until I met the right person that said, no, you don't. And so I said, we're going to make bourbon in Missouri. And then I wanted to use the resource we have in Missouri. I'm a big value added person. So, the state of Missouri is divided in half. We got corn in the north, and we got barrels, white oaks in the south. So bourbon fits both of those together in a Missouri product.
Nice.
And that's what I really wanted to do, was make a value added product all from Missouri and do it right here. The second thing is, as an agronomist, and this really plagues me to this day, that we make all of our whiskey out of cow and pig feed. Nobody eats that shit. Why would you make whiskey from it? And that's the other thing. I said, I'm going to make whiskey out of what humans have eaten for centuries. Not my.
So tied in that love for corn, yeah.
Yeah, and that's where I came up with the blue corn. And blue corn's eaten all the way from Southwest United States to Mexico, Central America, South America, pure Chile, and Argentina. Blue corn's on the menu. And they say it's healthy. Well, now we kind of understand that blue means antioxidants, and you eat antioxidants. And if you got purple corn, it's got twice as many antioxidants as blueberries, those kind of things you put together later on. But that's what I really wanted to do. I want to use local resources, add some value to them, and make my whiskey out of stuff that people have been eating for centuries. That was kind of two big things.
Had you distilled before, or was this something that you took up once you decided you wanted to get into the distilling business?
Well, my first distillation technical college level courses was in 83. Was going to make farm ethanol.
Mm-hmm.
And it was almost the same time that Tito started, I've learned later on. And people told me you couldn't do it. Private individuals just couldn't do it. First of all, I had to go to Kentucky and had to be a big company and whatever. That's the way you had to make bourbon. So you couldn't do it in Missouri, and a private individual couldn't do it any. So I listened to those people, and it was wrong. Tito, on the other hand, and all the craft distillers in this country owe him a big recognition with the fact he pushed ahead and said, no, you prove that I can't do it. And look where it's got him today. And That's kind of where he started in either 82 or 83. So I gave it up. He kept charging ahead, but that was my first exposure to distilling. And then I made beer and starting about 97. And then I don't like headaches and hangover. When I really realized that you can kind of separate those out with distillation, that's what distillation, kind of make distilled water concept. You separate your heads and tails. And then you got something clear that's not very interesting. and I'm a big fruit guy. So I started putting fruit with it. So my first products I used to make before I was legal were cordials. And that's why I do have cordials today. They've got a place, and I like cordials.
Mhm.
And I like to use whatever goes local. Persimmons, we've got black walnuts, raspberries, blackberries. That's kind of where we're coming from. But that's kind of where it started.
Gotcha. And the name, you're a wood turner. And if you go into your gift shop, I mean, you see, I don't know, 25 different hats that you've made there. And they're all cool, all different styles, from fedoras to like a baseball hat type of, you name it, you've got hat styles there. So how did you decide to name your distillery after that? Was it just, again, tying something from your personal life into the business?
If you look at the names, and Conor could tell you more about this than I did, they're kind of two names. Heaven Hill, Big Rock, Bluefish, Jim Beam, Jack Daniels, Maker's Mark. They're dope, toot, 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 toot. I don't know what it is about the bourbon and whiskey business, but there tend to be two words, and short and street. And my name is not. My name's Gary Heingarner. It don't fit on a bottle. It just, and nobody can spell it. That was a no-brainer. We can't go there. We got to do something different. So wood hats is kind of, they're dear to my heart, part of me. And so I thought, well, let's just call it wood hat. And what it does, it makes you ask that second question, what's this all about? And that's good. When you get somebody engaged and they ask you that second question, now you're on a path, right?
Right.
It's a tag. It really works. That's what I can say. People really enjoy it. I enjoy it. And what the hell, we're making whiskey.
Yeah. Tell us about the corn now, and tell us, how many different varieties that you grew this past year, and maybe hit some of the highlights of the interesting ones, and where you're at, as we're at the end of the season here, how many of the X amount that you planted, how many turned out? So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we had a couple of big projects this year. I learned later on that we tried to raise blue corn. Blue corn's our first corn. It doesn't grow very good here. And find out the Native Americans didn't even grow it at all here. It was all dry land, Southwest, and so we were trying to find a better blue corn. So with the help of genetics corn, we planted 60 different blue corns this year.
60 different ones.
60 different blue corns. We got more blue corns in New Florence, Missouri. And this picture in the background here is some of those plots. So we're trying to find a better blue corn. We got 10 orange flints. And I know all together, that's kind of what we got. And then I started a thing in Missouri called Missouri Heritage Corn Project, where we went to the grain banks and we got all the old corns that have been in the grain bank sitting in jars since the 1940s. It all came from Missouri. There's 42 of them. So we got them out of the jars and we planted them this spring. And we saw that these things growing for the first time since the 40s. Nobody's seen this stuff. So one of the projects we're going to do in Missouri, we're going to try to get, or my project is to make sure that everybody in Missouri gets a corn that's unique to them. Hopefully everybody in Missouri will have a unique corn, just theirs.
That's really, really cool. What a great project it is. Yeah.
We're going to have a lot of fun with this.
Yeah.
St. Charles white, St. Charles red. How about mortgage lifter? You're going to make a bourbon out of a corn that's called mortgage lifter? What the hell? It's great. There's just so much history out there. There's taste we don't know anything about because we haven't tasted it for so many years. But really, there's so many things. We've been stagnant in the whiskey business for so long and got kind of on this number 2 yellow corn because that's all out there. There aren't many options. There's just so many opportunities that didn't exist, before. It's so great to be in this business today.
Yeah. Earlier this year, I was at the distillery along with a couple other folks. I think even the legend was with me. I don't know if anybody else here, I don't think so, was with me. And we tried some whiskey that you made from orange flint that you'd grown the previous year. And it was incredible new make. And so you got to go into the barrels. So when are we going to start being able to taste some of that with some age on it? He's got some right there.
You can watch me taste it right now.
We should have done this a live broadcast from your place.
Right. So we've got a little bit of aged stuff. It's not very old. We're looking at a year.
Right.
But it has something to say.
Yeah.
It has to have something to say.
Yeah.
And I'm really listening close. It's just
we were blown away by just drinking the new make, so I can't imagine once you start getting
in the corn genetics business, the guys that do this for a living make orange flint corns for 6 continents, but not 7. They don't make orange flints for North America.
Right.
That's crazy, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Because we're in yellow dent.
Yeah.
You have no place to sell it. So we're deprived of the opportunity to even deal with orange flints. So when I saw these down in Guadalajara, Mexico, I thought, I want some. And they said, well, Gary, they won't grow where you're at. They're not real suited. I said, well, how far are they off? Well, we don't know. I said, well, then guess. Here's a handful of cash, big handful of cash. Send me 4 of them and I'll plant them. We just start from there. So we did 4 last year, and yeah, we were way off on some of them. Some of them only flowered after frost. It didn't happen. We picked some of the stuff in December 16th or 20th, and it's still 20%. They won't make it here. So then that gave them a place to start. So now we got 10 different orange flints this year, and most of those are going to be within the range of where we can harvest. We haven't harvested them yet, but we got some potential there.
Yeah.
And some of the brown stuff, it's got some. I'm not the best at describing it, but it's got some. It's got a unique place. We're going to hear more about it. I just know we do.
Very nice. Gary, I worked for a food broker for 10 years. And what that means is I worked in the grocery stores and I represented brands that didn't have their own sales force. And pretty much I would say 80% of products that are in a grocery store don't have their own sales force. They use brokers to represent them. So, and of course, it's always evolving. So over spending 10 years, I represented just about every product in the grocery store. And I can tell you that no business is like the bourbon business. They're not friendly to each other at all. They hate their competition. They would do anything they could to get their competition out of the stores. And the bourbon business, as we know, is different. And you are really a big part of making sure that happens in Missouri. And I just want you to talk a little bit about some of the things you've done for Missouri. You already talked about one of them already, the corn project, where everyone's going to try to get their own heirloom variety of corn, and still 630 will have theirs, you'll have yours. I think it's such a cool idea, but you've done other things too, like working on the trail. And, I saw you interviewed recently on TV. Yeah, it's a thing to promo your brand, really. And what do you have there? You've got, of course, your brand that you're pouring, but then I saw you had bottles of like 6 different other distilleries from the area. So you're just a big proponent of rising Missouri bourbon. And tell us a little bit about why that's important to you.
Well, Conor explained it a while ago. He grinds more corn than all the craft distillers in Missouri are going to do in 10 years in one day.
Yeah.
How can 630 be my competitor? He's such a small piece of the big pie. If he was gone tomorrow, it wouldn't make diddly squat to me. You see what I'm saying? So we're small. And so what we need to do is to work together and use each other's strengths and be when the rising tide floats all boats concept.
Right.
So I've worked really hard. And when I first started putting people together and says, let's get organized in Missouri. Come on, let's get a board together. Let's form this guild. That was one of the central concepts, is that we got to work together. We're not competitors. The big boys do this all the time. I mean, I think you agree that, well, why not us? So we put the trail together, the expedition. We all talk about each other's stuff, get them to go to other places and work together. It's just a lot better environment if you work together and we're going to help each other out. I just had some new people in today that, they took a long time. And I spent that time, but I know that what I did today, helping them get started, was going to be hard for them to learn on their own for maybe a couple of years. So, but they're down the road and they're going to talk about me and I'll talk about them. And that's how you create an industry. That's where you create excitement. And that's what the bourbon's about. It's excitement. When you put a story together and you make something that's deep, different, unique to you, that's what makes it interesting.
Yeah. Well, Gary, you're a special guy, and I really look up to you, and I hope you know that. I just think it's cool, everything that you got going. Last question. We like to have some fun with the last question, and this one is no different. I feel like if I was over at your house and I said I wanted some popcorn, it feels like it's going to be a 2-hour ordeal. Tell us a little bit about making popcorn at the Heingarner house.
Well,
you got 80 different varieties of popcorn you got to go through.
I do have a little bit of each one, but I also have I have this microwave machine. And you get this popcorn in this little sack, and you throw that in there and hit 5 minutes.
Come on now. Right. Gary Heingartner's making microwave popcorn. I don't believe this for a second.
But I do. I like to cook outside, Steve, and I have this outside fire pit that, it's 7 foot apart. It's across, and I can have all these things on a center rod, and I swing them across there, and they cook, and I make popcorn. So I've got a 20-gallon
this is what
popper.
Yes,
pot,
of course.
and I swing it across there with a great big oak paddle. I make 2. You put a little popcorn in a pot. Well, I put 2 cups. And then years ago, I decided to make the biggest bowl I could make. So I have a bowl that's 32 inches across, and that 2 cups of popcorn just fills that up. So
I want to be frank here. We didn't talk about this in advance. I just figured that there'd be something wild story here with Gary and popcorn. We've never talked about it. He didn't say, "Hey, about this." No,
I'm thinking about bringing it down here. We got an event on November the 6th in it, and we're going to have some wood turners in. It's a chili affair. So we're going to make chili, little chili chick off, and then we're going to have about 4 of my buddies come out here with lace, and we're going to make wooden chili bowls as part of the day. Oh, cool. And I think I'm going to bring that whole outfit down there, my outside cooking event.
Yeah.
I can get it on a forklift and mount it on a trailer and come it down here. But that's what I do. I like to make popcorn. Especially an open kettle. It kills everywhere. We just let her go, Put some brown sugar in it, make some kettle corn if you want. But that's what I do when I really like to make popcorn.
Yeah, of course. Well, Gary, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Let's hear it for Mr. Gary Heingarner.
Thank you,
Hello, Gary was great. Let's also hear it from Mr. Conor O'Driscoll. Conor was awesome. Really appreciate it. Excellent job. We'll wrap this one up, as we always do, by talking about where people can find us. Gary, we're going to start with you. Where can people find you? They want to follow this journey. Where do they need to go?
I'm at the Distillery 8 days a week. And
of course,
west of St. Louis on I-70 and 19. I'm Gary at woodhatspirits.com, Instagram, Facebook. That's kind of where I'm at most of the time.
All right. Conor, how about you? Oh, sorry.
How old am I?
I have an Instagram that I do not post on. It's CH O'Driscoll. But Heaven Hill Distillery, all the brands. Metal Corn has an Instagram now.
Yeah, that's cool.
And it's pretty freaking cool. But at your local liquor store.
Absolutely. Check it out.
Yeah.
Pick it up. All right. McNew, how about you? Where can people find you?
I am on Instagram at McNew ABV, and you can find me every Tuesday on the ABV Network channel, hosting bottle kills and last meals.
All right. For me, I'm an easy guy to find. I'm at Steve Akeley on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. I've got a website, steveakeley.com. We've also got a company website. That thing's abvnetwork.com. Check it out because everything that we do is out there. We put all of our previous shows. We've got over 3,000 podcasts, original podcasts we've made in the last 5 years. Check it out. We've got all those out there. We've got all of our blogs, so much more, abvnetwork.com. McNew, anything else to say before we get out of here?
I'd like to remind the audience to please give us a 5-star review that includes comments. It helps new people find the show, which is very important to us. And if you like what we're doing, we ask that you please visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/the Network.
All right. Great job today, McNew. For audience, we'll have a brand new show for you tomorrow. Looking forward to that. Until then, take care, everybody. See ya.
Bye.
Peace. Before we finish the show, let's talk about some great companies that support the ABV network. First up is Moonshine Still Pro. Moonshine Still Pro has a full line of products to help the home distiller. Whether you want to experiment on the stove in your kitchen or you're looking for a bigger setup in your backyard, owner Russell Creed and his team can help. They have multiple still offerings, accessories, and even grain from their partners at Goldstone Mill to assist you in making whiskey on par with your favorite distillery. They can also help you with some fabricated parts you probably can't make yourself if you are attempting a DIY still project. Learn more or order your still or parts at moonshinestillpro.com. Another friend of ours is the Goldstein family at Goldstone Mill. The Goldsteins offer a variety of heritage and heirloom grains to make the finest whiskeys in the world. Plus, they are more than just a grain company. They are truly consultants to make sure the grains they are providing to you or your business meet your highest expectations. Additionally, they work with mills around the country, ensuring shipping is as low as possible for their customers. If you're a distillery, brewery, or even doing this at home, Goldstone can assist you. Check them out at goldstonemill.com, call them at 217-254-6613, or check in via email at hello@goldstonemill.com. Last but not least, at the top of the show, I mentioned investment opportunities at the new liquor store concept, the ABV Barrel Shop, being launched in 2022 by myself, Jim Fosnot, and Scott Creighton. We are crowdfunding some of the capital needed to open the store. Not only does it offer a return on your investment, but a lifetime of status and benefits at the store. Of course, this investment is a loan and involves a high degree of risk, which may not be suitable for all persons. Prospective investors should carefully evaluate the risk and merits of an investment, should confer with their own legal and financial advisors, and should be able to bear the risk of the loss of their investment before considering the investment described herein. If you would like more information, contact us via the under construction website at abvbarrelshop.com and fill out the form.
The Bourbon Daily is part of the ABV Network. For more information or to become a sponsor, please visit abvnetwork.com. Thanks for listening and cheers.
This has been a Steve Akeley production.